Good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Mikey, how are you? It's a time for another Lead Better, where we talk about the day's field note. And this one, I think if you and I both go in open-minded, we can come to a really great episode because we're talking about not just a win-win compromise, but a total win solution. That's the title of the field note. Before seeking a win-win compromise, go for a total win solution. Are you for this, or is this just a verbal redefinition?
If you're just telling me that all I have to do is be open-minded, then that's where I can shut down right there.
You're not open-minded.
No, it's an interesting concept to me with the idea of when we talk about win-win situations, there is a compromise almost always involved.
Sure.
And that compromise means that you could call it a lose-lose instead of a win-win, right? Because you're going to give up something, I'm going to give up something, and if we talk about it in those terms, then we're both losing. So it feels a little bit strange to be like, okay, well let's just sort this out. Don't think about the main thing that you want, or only think about the main thing that you want. Don't think about them as like, I want three things and you want three things, and your third most important thing you won't get, and the third most important thing I won't get. But we're at least getting the top thing that we want, and then it's a win-win, or is that a total win, right? It feels a little bit like we're just kind of messing with words here.
Yeah. I think I can cut through all of this in a way, and it'll just be my way. My perspective on this will actually be the one that is correct, regardless of whatever you say or anybody that happens to be watching live or later.
You just cut through it with tyranny, and nobody wins.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
so I'm getting, because I have a history, I have a track record. I remember I met Stephen Covey back in the day, and win-win was one of the 7 habits. 40 million copies of that book went out the door. He was citing the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and a couple other people. And so I remember the buzzwords of it of the 80s. And we all joke about business buzzwords, but buzzwords have, there's a reason why cliches are cliches. And I used to have, when I was a journalist, I had a sign on my desk for a while that just said, kill cliches like the plague. So which is like, yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so here we go, and you're saying, well, the idea of a win-win, and I remember reading through that book when it first came out and thinking, oh, it's not just me kind of coming in and advocating for my position, but if I can take a step back and think about a way that's beneficial to you or beneficial to me, then maybe we come to a solution that we both feel good about, and great.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that the intent of that, and that phrase goes much further back, because I have kind of a history on this one, and I used to teach some of that content. I did a little more of a deep dive than I even normally do before our conversations. And it goes back 100 years before that, to a woman who was writing I think she was in the 1880s, something like that, and Mary Follett. And I have a citation about that here in just a second to talk about. And she coined the term win-win for a very particular reason, and actually uses a very particular personal example that is very illustrative, which I'll get to. So the point is, I think that there was a generation of leader who kind of came up around this idea. And in the 7 habits, if you will recall, the first 3 were sort of personal in terms of your own approach to productivity. The second 3 were the interpersonal behaviors, and this was the first of those second 3. Now, I think that perhaps in application in the decades since, that rather than it be a, hey, let's really think outside the box and find the solution that's really better that we haven't even thought about, rather than it be a, I'll give up this if you give up that, and we'll agree on this, and then there we go. And it's a little bit of lose, which is what the field note's about.
Right.
You kind of sort of lost the edge. So here, total win, the idea of saying, we do something that is actually better for you and better for me than we actually first anticipated. That's a much better goal. And I think it just was a sloppy execution of win-win that led to a kind of a debasement of what we would think about in those terms.
Is the headline too strong then, right? of the field note, right? The notion of we're going for a win-win gives you the impression that nobody's going to be dissatisfied. But the execution of win-win is both of us are going to lose something, right?
And it's like, let's just have a win-win.
Right.
Well, look, there, it got to the level that there was even a scene in, and I almost sent it over to you to use as a clip, but then sometimes you can get things yanked down, even if you're using them in a fair use, way.
Right.
There was an episode of The Office where there's a big, fight going on. One, person is saying, "I love this poster that I've put up in the office," and it was just a poster of little babies playing instruments.
Right.
And it was, and she's like, "I love it. It's very cute."
Right. And Oscar was like, "I'm completely offended by it."
Totally offended. Yeah.
Right.
And Michael Scott's leading the discussion. I didn't even watch The Office that much, and he's like, "Oh, we got to go through these the steps of this, and you get to this and this, and then you get to win-win, and then there was the step of win-win-win.
Yes.
We all win-win. The third win."
Right.
And the decision was made spot there, which was we're going to take it on the poster, and she's going to print a T-shirt that has the image on it, and you who are offended by this image will wear the T-shirt so you don't have to look at it.
Yes.
But she can, every time she looks at you, she'll have positive feelings.
Right.
Obviously a terrible thing. But that actually is so wildly accurate in terms of probably how many win-win discussions have actually played out.
Yes.
They're just as bizarre as print the poster on your T-shirt.
Yes. And the solution just prior to that was that we'll take the poster down every day except Tuesday and Thursdays. We'll put it back up.
Okay.
Right. Because he wanted to create a compromise instead of a win-win. So
Yeah.
the way that he was, fast running through that whole thing made it a really funny example of it being really inappropriate.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing, just to give you to complete the circle.
Yeah.
So the woman that Mary Parker Follett, who was the originator of the win-win phrase, she was from Massachusetts. She went to Cambridge in the 1890s, ended up at Radcliffe, and I think she actually got accepted to Harvard at one point. So a smart woman. She was an advisor to Theodore Roosevelt. But in the time when she was at the Harvard Library one day, she wrote about this and said that she was in one of the smaller rooms and somebody wanted to open one of the windows, and she wanted to have the window shut. Mm-hmm. Poster, right? We got the same problem here.
Right, yeah.
So we opened the window in the next room where no one was sitting. This was not a compromise because there was no curtailing of desire. We both got what we really wanted. For I did not want a closed room. I simply did not want the north wind to blow directly on me. Likewise, the other occupant did not want that particular window open. He merely wanted more air open in the room. Now, you could say, do you need to coin a phrase to come up with an illustration like that? I don't think she was looking at that as the best illustration. It probably just was an example to her as she was doing her research around management theory, which was really just about how do we work together better.
Right.
And she was like, oh, we can always find another solution.
Yes.
And so it's so surprising to me that her little illustration from that time period is so much like the vignette from The Office in weird ways.
Yes. So maybe because I have 6 kids, you have 5 kids, we've constantly been kind of negotiate on behalf of little kids all the time, right? Yep. That maybe we speed run to this kind of solution where we say, you're demanding something, but that's not really what you want. Mm-hmm. And your opposition here, they're demanding something, but that's not actually what they want, right? Every once in a while, you have a kid who what they're demanding is just to be oppositional, right?
Yes, right. Yeah.
That's
I've
when
never encountered that.
Yeah, but that's when you need to actually step in and be like, okay, you're the one who's going to be disappointed here because you're being nothing but oppositional. Mm-hmm. They're having an argument over not wanting the wind blown on their face. Another one's but that's really the key to it. And I like the way that we kind of simplified in the field note. You're just trying to understand what is it that you actually want, because there might be a no compromise solution for both of you, unless there's someone who's just not thinking about it, who likes to be in the middle of it and disagree. Like there's some people who it feels like their whole goal is to jump into a conflict. Sometimes I think even on world event, right? Mm-hmm. Us stepping into a situation in order to stop a war, in order to resolve some kind of conflict, is really just so that well, if we're the ones who are seen as the mediators, then we can grab a piece on our way out, right? That feels completely
right.
disingenuous, right? And it's no better than the little kid who's just standing there just to be oppositional. But if you have someone who's popping in for that kind of a reason, it feels as if they are making a good faith case. They're not. Now you actually have the leadership role of saying, you're not making a good faith case. You actually don't belong in this conversation at all. That's going to be a hard thing to do.
That's tougher, yeah.
The third win, like the win-win-win, usually means that, there's a third person here that, like, I almost feel like the only time there's a win-win-win situation is when there's like a non-profit involved, right? When there's someone who gets something just because, like, that's really the only like kind of third win kind of situation. This approach to win-win is interesting, but I feel it's one of those situations where it's so simple. Of course we do that, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those behaviors that a lot of times we haven't identified. No, this is a key to like a big portion of it is like stopping and asking people, what is it that you really want? Not what you want to resolve this argument, right? Or to win this argument.
Well, true. And I think that that's actually a really good point, which is a lot of times people aren't even clear to themselves about what they really want.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're actually inviting people into. It's not so much the idea of a negotiation as it is a deeper conversation. And that's kind of where I like, sometimes there's this word beyond dialogue where you get to the idea of dialogos, which some academics define as it's kind of the flow state of conversation, right, where you're just creating ideas and things are coming to you, what the other person says actually causes you to go, oh, wait a minute, I think I haven't been looking at this correctly. And so when you have that kind of a conversation, and in fact, even in the 7 Habits framework of the late 80s, early 90s, I can't remember what date exactly the book came out, in those 3 interpersonal habits, you had win-win, and then you had seek first, understand, then to be understood.
Right.
And then you had synergy, the idea of synergy, which was you're going to have people on your team where all of a sudden you've got a much better meld of solutions than you actually thought about. So if you actually are saying, well, tell me more about what you're thinking about. Do you mean this? And then they kind of outline that and you go, well, I think that's pretty close to where I was, but I've been looking at this. They go, oh, I never even thought of that, right? That's what you're trying to do. Yeah. So really, I think even in the total win, it's just stop defining win-win as a compromise solution. Actually go back to the original intent of it and elevate it up, and doesn't matter what you call it particularly. Yeah. And perhaps not using any kind of a buzzword like, well, we're going to sit at this table until we get a win-win solution. I don't think that does anybody any good.
No, it's fun. The only time I've ever been to mediation on a contract violation kind of dispute, it was interesting because there was 3 of us in one room who were representing the fact that we were short shrifted in what the violation was. And the other person was on the same floor, but in a different room, but it was just one person representing. And at some point in the discussion, it made it clear that the 3 of us who were together in the room kind of had different ideas of like what we really wanted. And so had we not gone through the mediation process, and she, the mediator wasn't mediating for the 3 of us, but she needed to understand like what we actually wanted. And one of us in the room really wanted the guy that we were opposite to be punished, right? Yeah. One of us really just wanted things to be restored, right? And another one wanted him.
Would you like to name that person specifically and then describe exactly the levels of Hades that you would?
No. Well, the other one is like, I want him to never be able to do this again because he's the kind of person,
who
right?
would do it, right?
Who would definitely do it again. So he needs like the kind of retribution that cripples him from being able to do this again. But those 3 positions that are all on the same side of the table were tough to kind of get to an answer on, right?
Yeah.
And so there was mediation that needed, and there was no win-win-win there, right? To say, what are you going to give up? Like, because one of us thought it was really important that he never be able to do it again. Another person just wanted, and I was the person who didn't like the conflict at all, and I wanted to just be able to quickly get to resolution on this, a little bit of punishment, but just let's move on.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you didn't care about his future victims, which is a whole other discussion.
Right. Exactly. No, it's odd that those kinds of conversations come up. You think that it'd be very simple. You'd think that a person who has a father of 6 children would be able to recognize that a lot quicker in a situation. But when we're in the middle of it and we're angry and we're wronged, right? And we're anxious about these types of things don't come up. Like for some people who are reading this today, this is extremely timely because their emotions are really wrapped up in the idea of, can I punish my opponent here, right? And compromise is a really dirty word for some people as well. And so the idea of trying to create a situation, I love the idea that for those people who think compromise is a dirty word, that this is a great framework for them as well. Because I'm not asking you to, I'm trying to figure out how we can both win without compromise here.
All right. Well, we've set a good, I think, some groundwork here, and for all of us, I think as I was looking up Warren Bennis, who's been a great writer on management theory, said that Mary Parker Follett, just about everything written today about leadership and organizations comes from her writings and lectures if you go back and look at them. And so that's just a really, we forget about certain people and their lineage and their legacy. And I love doing deep dives on that. So maybe we'll do something deeper on her.
Right. Okay, great. Super. All right. Till then,
Thanks, Mike.
and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.